Okay, 7th grade, so today is Wednesday, May 13th. Today we are on page 14 of our writing packet. So as always with the writing packet, the first thing we do is that little journal entry. Hopefully these are a little bit more fun for you guys. They give you a little bit of time to do something and talk about stuff that you like, that sort of thing. So here it asks you, what is one activity that you enjoy that you can do outdoors? Imagine explaining the activity to someone who has never heard of it before. What does it involve? What equipment do you need? What makes it fun? So what you need to do here is describe this to a point where if I've never heard of it before, that by the time I'm done reading this, that I could do that activity all by myself. So here, as always, you need to be writing one paragraph at least. You can always write more. How many sentences is in a paragraph? 5 to 7 sentences, right? So that's what you need to have for this. Obviously, I can't do this with you because it asks you to write about activities you enjoy, and I can't tell you what type of activity you enjoy. You have to figure that out on your own. So let's look at page 15. So we're looking at adverb phrases and clauses. We looked at phrases and clauses before, and independent clauses, dependent clauses, just as a reminder, and it gives you a little bit of a reminder right up here. A phrase has both a subject, or a phrase, has either a subject, a predicate, or neither one, while a clause has both a subject and a predicate. Now, just a reminder, what is a subject and a predicate? A subject is what the sentence is talking about. It's usually going to be at the beginning of the sentence. Almost always it's going to be at the beginning of the sentence. And that's what the whole sentence is focusing on, is whatever. It's usually going to be a noun. So he, she, soccer, it can be an object, it can be an idea, anything that's a subject. A predicate is the verb. So what is happening in the sentence? Or what is the subject doing in the sentence? So some phrases and clauses function like adverb, which means they modify a verb, an adjective, or another adverb in the sentence. So an adverb, what an adverb is it is describing, if we know adjective, they add that AD at the beginning just like adjective. Adjectives describe other words, right? So an adverb is modifying either a verb or an adjective. So describing a verb or an adjective even further. Or another adverb. So an adverb phrase tells us how, when, where, or why, and it's often a prepositional phrase. So if we look here, the example they give us is soccer players wear protective gear on the field. So wear is our verb, and here our adverb phrase is on the field because it's describing where the verb is happening. So where did they wear it? On the field. So it's answering that question of where. So the difference between an individual adverb and an adverb phrase is that an adverb phrase is more than one word, obviously. So on the field describes where they wore protective gear. So soccer gloves are thick with padding. So thick is our adjective, because again, an adverb can also modify an adjective or another adverb. So with padding is the adverb phrase, and it's modifying how they were thick. So how are they thick? They were thick with padding. So it's modifying that adjective, thick. An adverb clause, which this means that it has both a subject and a predicate. In order to be a clause, it has to be a subject and a predicate. Can also tell how, when, where, or why, and it is always a dependent clause. Now, what is a dependent clause and an independent clause, if we think back on one of our last lessons? A dependent clause cannot function on its own. An independent clause can. So if we look at this first example, when they catch the ball. If I just said, when they catch the ball, you would say, when they caught the ball, what? Like, what's going to happen? because it's not a complete thought. Because the ball can hurt, not a complete thought, once again. So it doesn't make sense on its own, so it's a dependent clause. An adverb clause is always a dependent clause, and it answers those questions of either how, when, where, or why. So here it says gloves protect goalies when they catch the ball. So when is the predicate, ball is the subject, and it tells us when they protect goalies. So gloves protect goalies when they catch the ball. So it's telling us when and modifying that verb protect. Now here we have the verb need. Goalies need gloves because the ball can hurt. It tells us why they need gloves. So because the ball can hurt is modifying that word need. And we know this is a phrase because it has both a subject and a predicate. Because is our predicate, and again, ball is our subject. So let's take a look at the guided practice here together. So we're going to do this guided practice at the bottom of 15, and then you guys will do page 16 on your own. So it says, circle the word in each sentence that the underlined phrase or clause modifies, which means the adverb phrase describes. Write how, when, or why to explain what the phrase or clause tells. So we're just writing the word how, when, where, or why based on what these underlined phrases, how they're modifying, and what verb they're modifying. So we are going to, I'm just going to highlight it, but we're going to highlight the word that the underlined phrase modifies. So let's say we were doing, just because that's kind of confusing, let's say we were doing this sentence, we would highlight this word because the phrase is modifying that word need. Okay, so we're highlighting or circling or whatever you guys want to do the word that is being modified. Then we write to explain what the phrase or clause modified, or what the phrase or clause tells us. So like here, they said why. So we would just write why on this line if we were answering this one. So let's look at our hint first. As always, often an adverb, phrase, or clause immediately follows the word it modifies, but sometimes other words separate the two. The phrase or clause may also come at the beginning of the sentence before the modified word. So the phrase, even though here the modified word comes before the phrases or the clauses, sometimes it can come after. So the phrase or clause might be at the beginning, just like it is here, which would mean the modified word has to be after that. So goalies are the only players who touch the ball with their hands. So what do they do with their hands? They touch. So the way that we can tell this is we're looking for a verb or adjective that is modified by this. So touch is describing what? With their hands is describing what about touch? It's how they touched it, right? So all we need to do is write how, because it's how they touched the ball. How did they touch the ball? With their hands. So you can answer it that way. As the ball comes towards the goal, the goalie moves quickly. So here we could say, if you can't, an easy way to figure out if you can't figure out what word it's modifying, you could start asking yourselves these questions. So just like we did up here, you could say, how did they touch the ball? With their hands. If we said, how does the goalie move? As the ball comes toward the goal. That doesn't make sense, right? When does the goalie move? As the ball comes toward the goal. That makes sense, right? So our word here is moves, because it's the verb that we're talking about here. So now we know that it is when the goalie moves. So we could just ask ourselves, so if you said, who touched the ball? How did they touch the ball? With their hands. That answers it fine. But if you said, who touched the ball? With their hands. That doesn't make sense. So that's how you can explain what the phrase or clause tells. So number 3 says, if necessary, the goalie dives onto the ground. So Here we have that word dives, which is our verb that's going to be modified by onto the ground. Now, what does onto the ground describe about the word dives? If you said, how did they dive? Onto the ground. That doesn't make sense. When did they dive? Onto the ground. Again, doesn't make sense. Where did they dive? Onto the ground. That is how it's being modified. It is describing where. Now 4 says sometimes the other team scores because the ball gets past the goalie. So the word is scores because that's what they're doing is scoring. And they scored because the ball gets past the goalie. So how did they score? Because the ball gets past the goalie. Doesn't make sense. When did they score? Because the ball gets past the goalie. Doesn't make sense. Where did they score? Doesn't make sense. Why did they score? Because the ball gets past the goalie. That makes sense. So it's answering the question of why. This one, the game is over after 2 halves of play. So over is going to be our word here because when is it over? After 2 halves of play. First, you might have to determine what this is describing first, and that might help you to understand what the word is because over is our adverb here. So it's a adverb phrase describing an adverb. And it answers that question of when. So when is it over? After 2 halves of play. So now you guys need to take a look at page 16 and you'll do this on your own.